Today, we have four amazing panelists that have chosen to share their evenings with us and who will sharing their perspectives about fintech, payments, and economics. So this is targeted to all econ students or anybody really that is interested in either fintech, payments, or economics. It might just be a little bit more intertwined than you might initially assume. So we're excited to explore this, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So today, again, we welcome you to our meeting. We will go ahead and share what the ECO AAI introduction, and we just want to share what that is. It's really quite exciting and has been now happening for a little bit over 8 months, I think. It came during the summer, and it's really exciting because in some sense, we're all just hoping to increase the pipeline of economics students and majors and just careers in Atlanta. But before that, I'm very much goal oriented. And so I have some goals for us just to keep in mind. If I don't lead the conversation and get these goals sorted out, please send me a DM and say, hey, you actually failed. And I'll make sure to send you a follow-up with the answer you want. Okay. But again, today as the event name says, we're going to explore the intersection between fintech, payments, and economics. Then as students, I think one of the main things that we're focusing on is really job opportunities. So one thing we want to showcase is job opportunities for econ students who are interested in fintech and payments, and then for everybody else as well. But I would also say that today is going to be a great opportunity to get to know major players in the industry through the experience of our wonderful speakers. So that being said, what is the ECO AAI? So it's a very long name, but I feel like it's thorough. It's the Econ Collaborative of Atlanta Area Academic Institutions. And it is a partnership between the Atlanta Econ Club and local universities and clubs around Atlanta. Namely Georgia Tech, Georgia State, Georgia Gwinnett College, and then Oglethorpe. We have some other universities who are active as well, but you can always count to see us for there. If you are in another university and are interested in becoming part or a more active part of the ECOII, you are more than welcome to send either Jessica or myself an email. We'll go ahead and make our contact information available at the end of the call. But without further ado, I'll go ahead and would love to ask our panelists to go ahead and introduce themselves. And Glenn, I'll actually have you start.
All right, thanks again for having me. My name is Glenn Sarvati. I have been in Atlanta now since 1995, and I would say in the payment space through since about 25 years ago. I am an economics major in terms of the way I came to the space. Got my MBA and got involved in, I would say, more traditional, large corporate kind of finance functions. And we'll get into this a bit in terms of the way people come at fintech, but I think things are very different than they were when I got involved back in 1997 through a company called CheckFree, which is now part of Fiserv. You may be familiar with them. I would say they're one of the real kind of anchor tenants in terms of the fintech companies within the Atlanta ecosystem. And I came at it from a business development and finance side. And because of kind of the vibrant nature of the business, I was able to really get involved in a lot of different aspects. It was a much smaller company at the time. So I had a chance to really participate in a variety of different ways and just kind of learning by doing. And I think that that's, I still think that's true, although I think that there's a bit more of an awareness of what fintech is. Let me stop there because I want to make sure everybody else has a chance to give their introductions. We can kind of come back and maybe get a little bit deeper into some of those ideas.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Glenn. Tommy, please go ahead.
I'm Tommy. Thanks, Jael. Great to be here. I'm Tommy Marshall. I'm the executive director of the Georgia Fintech Academy, which is a program of our university, public university system, the University System of Georgia. And we started this program in the 2019-2020 school year. And we've over the last since that was beginnings, we've had a little over 4,000 students take one of our fintech courses that are available on most, or certainly all the campuses that are represented tonight, the public campuses. We haven't been able to figure out a way yet to get our courses into the private schools. But I'm new to academia. I spent, like Glenn, over 20 years in industry, but always as a management consultant. But in my consulting capacity, I was helping American Express, Wells Fargo, KeyBank, US Bank, Truist. These were all my clients, and everything I worked on with them was related to payments and or fintech in some way, shape, or form. So it's really an area of the financial services industry that I've spent my entire career. So really looking forward to this conversation tonight. Love economics, can't get enough of it. I was trained, I guess, most deeply in economics in doing my MBA, but also enjoyed it a bit in undergraduate studies.
Awesome. Thank you, Tommy. And for everybody, I'm actually in 2 of the fintech classes. They're very, very fun. If you have the opportunity to just go ahead and enroll in those, I cannot recommend that enough. But on to the next one. Jessica, please take it away.
Thanks, Jael. Hi, everyone. Jessica Dill. I am strategic coordinator for the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta around our high priority initiative that we call Promoting Safer Payment Innovation, or PSPI. We love our acronyms. But just to take a step back, I've been at the Fed for 12 years. My background is a little non-traditional. So I have my master's in city and regional planning. I came to the Fed to work in our community and economic development group. That was my foot in the door. That group thinks about serving low to moderate income populations and making sure that they have access to services. So that's kind of how I got my foot in the door at the Fed. I studied housing markets for the past 11 years, and then had a chance to step into payments in October, November. So I'm probably the newest person on the panel to payments. But basically what I do is we have several business lines at the Federal Reserve that are focused on payments. So we have our retail payments organization, we have a cash function, we have a cash office, we process checks, we provide automated clearinghouse, ACH services. And so there are a lot of experts that work in those business lines. We also supervise and regulate financial institutions that are engaged in the financial services payment industry. And lastly, in our research department, which is where I'm housed, there are several economists that have deeply studied payments issues. And so I came up through the research department, the economic research department, working with folks with econ backgrounds for the past 10 to 11 years. And in that space, I got involved with the Atlanta Economics Club, which is who we're partnering with here today. And wearing that Atlanta Economics Club and Economic Research Department hat, we realized that there's a lot of work we can do to diversify the pipeline of talent coming into the economics field, both academic field and kind of into the industry. And so from that, the EcoEye, I call it EcoEye, Jael, the EcoEye partnership was born, and I'm really excited now with my current role today on promoting safer payments innovation, thinking about payments inclusion. So payments inclusion, we want to improve access to and awareness of efficient, secure, and affordable payment services, especially for low to moderate income populations that may not have access to those services. We also want to promote payment integrity. And so making sure when you make a purchase, the intended recipients receive the correct amount and your information is protected. And so thinking about payment integrity and payment inclusion is how I spend my days now. And I will stop talking and pass it back to you, Jael.
Awesome. Thank you, Jessica. And then last but not least, Fernanda, if you could just go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Jael. Hey, everyone. I'm Fernanda Arcaraz. I am a kind of recent grad. I don't know if I can still say that, from Georgia Tech. So I did my undergrad and my master's there. I graduated from master's in spring of 2019. And right after that, I started working at NCR. as full-time. I had been there previously for a year already interning, but I've been at NCR ever since. I've had a couple roles within NCR. So a couple of my first roles were a lot more in the Fintech division of NCR and all of the banking technology that we use. But now, ever since this summer, I transitioned over to our hospitality industry. And so that's our restaurant business side of NCR. And we make the hardware and software that anything from like a mom and pop cafe to McDonald's, Starbucks, they're some of our biggest customers in the hospitality industry. And so I specifically am a pricing strategy analyst on that team. And so basically what I do is I'm in charge of like the pricing, the packaging, and the go-to-market strategy that we want to follow for these products, hardware, software, and services. And of course, a lot of those products have payments attached to them. NCR is a little bit of a newer player in the payments industry compared to some of our competitors that have been around a lot longer. But so we, for example, if we sell hardware and software to a customer, they might also need a way to process their payments at the restaurant. And so NCR provides those services. And specifically in my role, I have to analyze how the market is competing with us for hardware, software, payments, services, anything and everything the customer might need, anything a restaurant needs to run its restaurant. I am in charge of pricing, packaging, and go-to-market strategy for those products at NCR. Thanks. Back to you, Jael.
Awesome. And then just that everybody has an idea, my name is Jael Ortiz. I am currently a student at Georgia State University. Like I said, I'm taking some finance or some fintech classes with the Georgia Fintech Academy, but I'm from a finance and business econ major with an international business minor. And then I'm heading to Wells Fargo Securities this summer in their investment banking division going into FIG. So really excited to be leading and moderating this, but I am way more excited to hear the conversation start. So that being said, on to our first question, and I'll go ahead and stop sharing. So one of the really cool things that we started talking about at one of our planning calls was the difference, or maybe the intersection between payments and fintech, and whether one was a subset of the other, or whether they were similar or interchangeable. So starting off, Fernanda, how would you define and maybe differentiate payments and fintech?
So I would say that payments is the industry. Fintech is the technology that enables that industry. So for example, at NCR, we have payments across several industries that NCR works in, but the financial technology that we develop is obviously to enable our customers to be able to transact, to be able to take those payments. And so I think obviously they go hand in hand, because whatever the technology allows us to do just pushes us further in how we can process those payments. But again, customers are now demanding more and more types of different payments transactions, payments processing. Merchants are demanding more from their technology providers. I need to be able to take Apple Pay, credit cards, not just swiping the card, but inserting the chip. So EDC versus EMV, all these payments terms. And so it's kind of like this constant feedback loop of what do customers want? What does the everyday person want when they're transacting? How is that pushing fintech? And then again, how is the technology that we are developing enabling even more types of payments that we can take?
Awesome. Thank you for that. Now, in comparison, Glenn, what's your thought on that?
I agree. I would probably phrase it maybe slightly differently, in that I think of payments as a subset of fintech. I mean, when you think about the word fintech, it's really taking technology and attaching it and figuring out a way to solve or simplify financial services issues. And so much of financial services has some place attached to it, a payment, like you mentioned, Fernanda, most of the solutions. And I know you know this, but I love this kind of trivia. NCR, originally, the name of the company was National Cash Register. It got shortened to NCR. And if you think about technology, I mean, it's a very antiquated version of technology, but the cash register was the thing that drove the point of sale going back to, think of the old manual version in the 1920s, and the cash drawer popped out and you had a manual lever that, helped you make change and, popped up how big your sale was. The same thing is really still happening today. It's just becoming more technology driven, as Fernanda said. And as you move more and more, not just in terms of, the different cards and Apple Pay and wallets, digital wallets you can swipe in a physical point of sale, we all know there's more and more sales taking place online through e-commerce. And of course, by definition, then you've got the added aspects of all the different technology solutions there. And that gets back to the point that you were making, Jessica, about financial inclusion too, because obviously you can't do that without a card. You can't, it's very difficult to pay cash if you're buying something online. And that's where you start getting into some more challenges. So we can kind of bring the loop back to that. I think in Atlanta in particular, we've really made our way through, our strengths are primarily in the payment space because we've had so many card processing companies and payments companies here. But more broadly, there's mortgage technology, there's the risk aspect of figuring out if someone is a good credit risk. There's insurance technology, which I would still all categorize as subsets of fintech. But I think, they are really one and the same. But to me, it's it's the payments piece that kind of is the subset of the bigger, but it's always there.
Awesome.
Jack, can I add on to that?
100%.
I love how Fernanda put it, and I don't disagree with the thing that Glenn said, but I kind of see it as a Venn diagram where, to Glenn's point, where payments and fintech overlap. There's a lot of overlap, but the part of payments that I think doesn't exist within fintech is cash, and that's something that we've thought about at the Fed as we think about supporting an economy that works for all, and as thinking about payments inclusion, making sure that as we adopt more technology, what about the portion of the population that is cash reliant, that hasn't adopted technology? If we move to a society where all merchants are cashless, like that might close a portion of the population out to opportunities or to the ability to kind of survive and live and get things done. And so in this payment inclusion space, we definitely underscore and thinking hard about the cash reliant population and how to make sure that they still have access as we move forward. So I see that as being part of the payments circle that isn't overlapping fintech. And then, as you said, Glenn, there's some credit scoring, perhaps maybe like budgeting app, like there's this other side of the Venn diagram that exists outside of payment work. So
that's a really good point. A Venn diagram is a better way of putting it. And the cash piece is very important. And there's even been some governmental aspects of that too, where there's certain municipalities have passed laws that say storefronts have to accept cash, which I think makes perfectly good sense. Otherwise, as you say, you're excluding significant parts of the population, and that's one of the challenges through the pandemic. Is as the stores closed, you started to see less cash usage, and it'll be an interesting question to see how much of that really bounces back as opposed to if it's a permanent shift.
Awesome. I love it. So how has your personal background led you to fintech, payments, econ, or all of the above? And I'll go ahead and start with Tommy.
So when I first got into consulting in the mid 90s, it was at a time when this thing we now refer to as the web was just becoming just a thing that was even talked about. There was a company called Netscape that went public in, I don't know, what, 98, 99, 97 maybe. And that event really caught the attention of the financial services industry as a whole in a very meaningful way. And because financial services deals very, very, very heavily in information and data to function, it was really probably one of the first industries to really kind of embrace the internet wholeheartedly and the web wholeheartedly and start to figure out ways to adapt and innovate to take advantage of that. And I was newly minted MBA at the time and kind of fell into a great situation where a large consulting firm was creating a, what do we call it? I think it was an online financial services practice group. So just a strategy group, just to focus on online financial services for big banks, essentially. And one of my very first clients was, thankfully, American Express. And this was a time when American Express was doing all the wonderful things it does today with the cards that many of you are probably aware of. They also ran a very significant investment business, a kind of retail investment business that later in time they spun off, and now it's called Ameriprise. And then they also had a variety of other different businesses, financial services related, and they wanted to get into banking and through using this new thing, the web. And so we've got a wonderful consulting project for their strategic planning group, working for kind of a legend of the industry, a guy named Harvey Golub, who was the CEO of American Express at the time. And that project really set me on a massive collision course with what we call fintech today, what we call payments, of course, because if you all have done consulting, or if you get into it in the future, you'll realize you go in and you start working with clients. And then if you're doing a good job, the clients like you and they want you to do other things. And so Amex being what it was and really is, and all its different facets of financial services that it's involved in, I ended up kind of having a nice consulting home there, working in all these different parts of their business. And they really taught me the payments business in a really kind of meaningful way. And then I kind of, with that knowledge, could then go do other things in other places in the industry. But it was really kind of that entity and kind of the point in time that really kind of drove and really informed my whole career in this fintech area.
Awesome. What an amazing opportunity that must have been. What about you, Fernanda, coming from a purely econ background and then ending up at a place like NCR and being exposed to that? How were you able to leverage your econ background and end up in fintech and payments?
So I would say that first, I got an internship. That's how I really got my foot in the door at NCR. I was looking for something to do in the summer between graduating from undergrad and starting my master's that fall. And so I got an internship in their financial technology division, and I was a data analyst. I was doing a lot of analytics for a sales team, the sales team within the fintech division of NCR that brings in the most revenue in the world. So it was huge exposure to basically not just learning about NCR, but also learning about like all the technology that we sell within financial technology division, our competitors, what even is financial technology nowadays. I really got exposed to a huge part of that through that job. And I stayed on for, I think about 2 years is how much I did in that job. And then I went on to basically do a more elevated role as a senior analyst for, instead of supporting just that region, I then supported basically the senior vice president. So the person that's in charge of the entire world for fintech sales at NCR. And so I got to work even more in depth with him and use a lot of more of like the technology background that I got from Georgia Tech by working in Tableau and doing like Salesforce reporting and dashboards. So a lot of that like applied data analytics that I learned not just in undergrad, but also in grad school, because they required us to take a couple coding classes and using programs like Stata, R, SPSS, all those good ones that are doing economic modeling, whatnot. And so I think that after that experience, I had enough knowledge within NCR that it positioned me to move to my latest job, which is, like I said, a pricing strategy analyst. And here, I would say in this job is when the most I've used my degree in all the roles I've had previously, which is something that I really wanted to get into for that reason. So in my other roles, I was using a lot of like the hardcore like Tableau creation of dashboards and analytics. But in this role, I was really using the some of the classes that I got to take in my economics masters. Like I think one of them was called Economics for Managers. Another one was Industrial Organization. A lot of like firm strategy and decision making based off of consumers. And so in my day in, day out, I basically consider that and have to analyze consumer decision making, how that affects NCR, how NCR's financials need to be met every single day based off of the products that we're offering. And so I think that was like a big just combination of getting to use what I learned in school, but applied more to the company that I'm working at, because obviously you learn so much on the job. But economics really prepared me to be able to have the conversations of what does opportunity cost mean? What is behavioral economics? How does that interact with how NCR wants to price? And just all these different terms that you definitely do see in school, and be able to leverage that in conversations with my team, who is from different backgrounds, but I would say it has given me a leg up, that even though I'm rather new to the position, I came in having that economics knowledge for the pricing team at NCR, which like I said, I also work with our payment specific pricing team. So it's just kind of been like a good way to use my degree. And NCR is a massive company. So obviously there are plenty of positions that I could use my degree in. But I think this one has been like a good sweet spot of using my technology background and my economics background, and being in a really pretty lean team. So you get exposure to a lot of the moving parts within an industry, specifically mine, the hospitality industry at NCR.
That's amazing. And before we move on, I'm interested in hearing Glenn's experience in this.
Sure. I don't know if you could see, I'm jotting down lots of notes here because there's so many things I want to follow up on. And not surprisingly, I think that, my experience is probably obviously a lot closer to Tommy's than Fernanda's, but it really reminds me and kind of reinforces what I was thinking is how much things have changed since Tommy and I entered into the fintech and payment space versus today. When you mentioned, Fernanda, Tableau, data analytics, things like Salesforce, if you've got those skill sets that you bring to the table, I think you're in such a good position to get involved in, again, as Tommy said, data. If you want to work with data, payments has just almost an endless amount of data that needs to be analyzed, and can, more, insights can come out of it. So that just makes you very valuable to a lot of these firms. And so, Tommy, who am I forgetting? I'm just thinking there's a couple of different ways you can get involved in the fintech and payment space too. You've got 4 or 5 very large companies that are either headquartered here or at least have very significant operations. I'm thinking of NCR, Fiserv, FIS, Global Payments. Equifax is a little bit different. Those are the big ones. Tommy, who else? Maybe Deluxe.
Deluxe just opened. They took over the Glen Ridge Parkway building over. They're Minneapolis based, but a significant presence. Visa.
Visa's opening.
They're
1,000 people here.
They're putting 1,000 people in Midtown in the next year or so.
But we keep track of a list of Tommy and I both work together at the Technology Association of Georgia's fintech group on a pro bono basis. And, along with those large companies, we've got a list that just continues to grow. And I think we're right around 200 now of companies in this space. So you can go with a larger firm, you can go with a smaller firm where it's going to be much less structured. And that's kind of the way I came into things at the time. It was a company that was it had just recently gone public, but it was a smaller shop where everybody kind of played the jack of all trades role. And it was about the same time, Tommy, that you mentioned that you were getting involved in, this payment space. I had about 8 years of experience in kind of more traditional economics, finance type work, including a couple of years at the Federal Reserve, actually, Jessica. But yeah, so I didn't go and say, and I don't think at that time anybody said, I want to go into payments. I just don't think that's what really happened. Today, I think some people actually do. I actually followed one of my prior bosses who left his company and became the CFO at this company called CheckFree that was very heavily involved in kind of really revolutionizing the online banking and bill payment business and providing the service for a lot of
Glenn, you were that was the hook for online banking, was bill pay.
Yes.
And so every single consulting project we were doing, we were like, okay, who's talking to the CheckFree people? We got to have them in the solution that we're crafting for this client. There was like no other, it was the go-to solution.
And this is where the partnerships all come into play also, because CheckFree made the decision. We talked, Fernando, you mentioned consumer behavior. One of the things that people talk about, so much of financial services is based on trust. And, banks can have a bad name, but people do tend to trust their banks with their money. And one of the challenges the CheckFree had is they originally started thinking, oh, we can actually sell this software directly to the consumers. And at the time, you couldn't download it online. This was still buying a box at Egghead Software, which is a lot like Blockbuster, something like that, and then loading it in. But they quickly realized that the millions of dollars it would take to build the brand and create the trust that was necessary was just cost prohibitive. So they said, okay, we'll take our brand out of the mix and we'll do it behind the scenes for the banks and let them be the trusted provider. And that's where I got involved with, out of just pure economics, I got involved with business development, striking other partnerships with other companies. We looked at international opportunities. I got involved in investor relations over time. And then just by osmosis, you start learning about how this stuff actually works behind the scenes. One of the other things that a lot of this is based around not only the credit card and debit card rails, but something called the ACH, the Automated Clearinghouse, which again, if you go back in time, it was the Atlanta Federal Reserve that actually originated that process back in the late 70s, early 80s. And that's still today where a lot of these, the transactions are actually running. I could go on. So let me, one more thing I will mention the other place where you can really think about it separately. Again, you got consumer behavior, but there's an awful lot of business to business activity too. And that's, again, where you have to think about how businesses approach their payments. And you think about all the data that comes from consumer payments, there's even more that go along with the business payments, which is one of the reasons that in many cases today, those are still more paper-based because of the fact that there's still all the backup of invoices and I'm paying this much because of this invoice, but I'm short paying on this one. That data is kind of difficult to necessarily attach all the time to what's going through the payment rails. And that's where I think a lot of the opportunities that people are going to be attacking over the course of the next 5 years or so to, as technology keeps getting stronger, there's better ways to actually solve
it. Great point, Glenn. That's what I was going to say too. I was like, that's the horizon. That's the big growth horizon at this intersection of fintech and payments, is what, Glenn, you were just talking about, that business payments area. Because if you think about it, like Jessica, there's this awesome retail payment study that Claire Green runs out of the Atlanta Fed, and I think Glenn and I have been having Claire do a report out on the payment study for what it seems like for years and years and years. And there was this time where you see why isn't the cash why isn't there less cash being used and more debit cards and more Apple Pay and more of that? I mean, that's what we were all hungry for, more of that electronification. And that's really happened, even more dramatically in the COVID years. But still, you can see we kind of the big growth in all the electronic consumer payment stuff to a degree has happened, and it'll continue to grow and grow and grow. But when you look at business, the level of paper check usage is it's insane. It's over 80%. So there's this massive automation opportunity in business payments that
actually I just spoke at the Luxus Client Conference last week.
Oh yeah. Oh good.
What we talked about was, people, there's still this belief that the check is basically dead. There were 12.5 billion checks written last year still in the US. And about half of them, to your point, Tommy, are still, on their businesses. And those tend to be the highest value checks too. So there's an awful lot of that still going on.
Can I ask a question about that? Because I
Please.
think just to underscore one of the things you said, Glenn, that there's over 200 firms in the Atlanta area that are in the payments kind of fintech space. The fun fact that we like to cite at the Atlanta Fed is over 70% of domestic payments are settled in the metro Atlanta area. Is that still
It
current?
is.
You're laughing out loud.
Now
Because we all argue internally about this metric.
Is it not accurate?
No, it's accurate. It's there's always this desire for the number to always go up. It's very hard to grow from. It's between 2/3 and 70%. That is accurate.
So, and that's what my question is as you look at the horizon for business payments, are we positioned in the Atlanta area to take that on? Is it the same types of firms that would grow into that space, or is it a different type of firm? Just as someone, again, that's new to payments, wondering where the opportunity is at. Can you speak to that, either of you?
I think it's the same. I think that we certainly are as well equipped as anybody else. And it's really kind of the capabilities you build around a lot of the companies that are really providing what you would call kind of the plumbing, the core infrastructure to run the payment. There's one company called the Clearinghouse, which is actually co-owned by about 20 of the largest banks. And they actually come right out and say, we're just building the pipes and we're going to run that information through it. It's the marketplace's job to figure out how to create value out of that and add other bells and whistles around it to really create that value. So, given that we're the home of the pipes, we're the intersection, kind of like, the way Atlanta was terminus with all the railroads coming together. It's very similar to that. So if you're going to be working about how you can bring greater value to it, what better place to be than where the pipes are running already anyway?
And I guess to drive that home a little bit more, so Global Payments is the largest fintech employer in Georgia. And they're one of the pipes, the big pipe companies and processors, of course. So just this morning, or maybe it was Friday, Global Payments got a press release saying we want to divest ourselves from our net spend business unit, which is one of many business units that Global Payments has. And then I was like, oh, that's curious. What's going on there? Because it's a good business. It's a prepaid processing business, runs out of Texas. And then they were kind of clearly saying, this was all in their quarterly update for investors late last week. They were saying, we see so much opportunity in the B2B, business to business payment space, that we want to make sure we as Global Payments are as focused as we absolutely can be on business to business payments. Therefore, this net spend piece that's really more of a consumer, business to consumer enabler, we want to divest, and just so that we can be even more laser focused on business. So it was just I thought a good example of where, here's a very large player in Atlanta that's just continue to make investments and business decisions around that space. Another one that's probably worth noting is FleetCor, which is a company that's just in the last 10 years is like grown incredibly fast. And they are really a B2B provider to a variety of different industries, including hospitality, including the kind of automotive trucking space in a lot of different ways. But they bought kind of just, I don't know, a year ago or so, a big company called Corpay that's just about automating accounts payable. And it was one of, I think, 80 purchases they've done, mergers and acquisitions they've done in the last 10 years to just grow their B2B capability.
And maybe on the flip side to that, it occurs to me, FleetCor probably another one of those big Atlanta companies that belong on that list. The other one like that just came to my mind then, because that is Income, which to me is almost kind of the flip side of FleetCor, because whereas FleetCor is working on the business to business payments, Income is almost entirely when you go to CVS, Publix, wherever, and you see kind of that big kind of display of all the different kinds of prepaid cards out there. They're behind the majority of those. They're the ones that actually provide that service. They private label brand those so you can buy them for each individual retailer or whatever, also if they're general purpose. And At the end of the day, they're running on the Visa card rails or the MasterCard rails, but they're, as I was talking before, they're the ones doing all the bells and whistles around the edge that create the additional value for it. And again, it's an Atlanta-based company.
Awesome. I love this. So I am all for efficiency, and I would love to get 2 more questions in before we shoot it to the audience, which have been doing an amazing job at putting some questions in the chat already. But maybe one question that relates specifically to the students in this group. How do you think someone with an econ background would benefit into going into fintech or payments? And this can go to Fernanda.
Well, kind of like I said, it's having the lingo really helps put you a step ahead compared to others who might not have the econ background. So I think I have noticed this in my current role. Actually, my day-to-day manager is not from an econ background at all. She also went to Georgia Tech. She is more of and then she has an industrial engineering degree. And so I think that what I've noticed is that I've been able to relate a lot to like what I said I saw in my coursework and say, oh yeah, it makes sense to follow this kind of pricing strategy because of XYZ. And so I've been able to, I guess, grow faster in my role and be able to have those conversations with her, who she's been in the role a lot longer than I have. And I think that is just something that helps you get ahead because you're able to have those conversations. You're able to be passionate about it as well, saying this is what I majored in and I liked it and I'm getting to work in it. And I'm getting to and see how it is applied in an everyday job. Because like I said, it is a lot of learning at the job. It's not just crunching your numbers like you do in school oftentimes just to make sure you get that A on the test. But it is saying, I learned to critically think in this economics framework. Now, how do I apply that to how, for example, for me, how NCR is pricing out its hospitality products, how we are incorporating our payments business whenever we sell a point of sale to a local coffee shop. So all of that like strategic and critical thinking framework that I think economics really gives you in school has really allowed me to kind of get ahead faster in my current role and be able to speak that lingo that others might not have acquired from a different background until more years of experience.
That's awesome. And then Tommy, I'm curious to see, have you noticed how econ students maybe perform at your fintech classes? And is that any different than any other majors?
I've noticed, the majority of the majors in the fintech program are finance, computer information systems, and computer science. That makes like 80%. The remaining 20% kind of breaks down pretty broadly, but that's economics, political science, more kind of humanities, I'd say driven majors as a general rule. I don't have a sense of like who does better. But I'm sure that those that are studying economics are doing great and finding them kind of naturally being attracted to what we're delving into in fintech, or as they're moving into jobs, they're doing great. Because underlying all this fintech stuff is financial services, and what drives financial services forward is economic behavior. And so if you can understand that, you have to understand it at a certain basic kind of level. And then to the degree you can get into the more kind of detailed areas of certainly just any area of economic theory, it's gonna, I think, be really a wonderful basis for doing any good fintech work effectively, for sure.
If I can add just a little bit on top of that, I think that, and this is probably a little bit of a generalization, but fintech is, obviously we said the intersection of financial services and technology. I think a good number of the companies are almost tech thin, where you've got the technology that almost takes the lead. And quite frankly, I mean, we know that, people who come out of college with, computer science backgrounds and coding skills right now are in such hot demand. I mean, in the reality is one of the reasons is they can go to a lot of different types of companies and make an immediate contribution because, you can plug them into a project. They've got that coding skill set and they can be off and running. To me, it really needs to be that true merger between the two. So I think when you bring the other side of things in the financial services, which is much more along the lines of the finance and economics, you need that perspective in there as well. And the other big thing is all the growth area and the real target markets that all of these companies are going after are the Gen Zs and the younger populations. And we've always said when I was in those rooms, we can't use ourselves as a focus group. If you've got a bunch of millennials and baby boomers and people who are 40 and over, you're totally missing the boat about what the rest of the world's looking for in terms of the younger demographics. So I think having that perspective, along with the economic perspective that you bring to the table, immediately can make you very valuable.
Amazing. Now, last question in a rapid fire style. What word would you use to describe both fintech and economics? And Jessica, if you want to go ahead and take a stab at this first.
I want to use the word rich, and I think it's rich in terms of opportunities. So it's a descriptive word. Go ahead, though. That was more than one word. Rich is my word.
Love it. Love it. What about you, Glenn?
I'd say evolving, continuously evolving. It looks different than it did when I started. It looks different than I did 10 years ago, and it's going to look different again very soon. And to me, that's what makes it so exciting.
Awesome. What about you, Fernanda?
I would say probably massive, just because it's everywhere. Payments are everywhere. Financial technology is everywhere. We would not be able to live without it. Our day-to-day lives, all the transactions that we do and that we enable for others to be able to do, it's massive. And I think before I was in my role, I realized like, oh yeah, I swipe a credit card at Kroger, like, so what? But all of the networks behind that are necessary to be able to enable that transaction is just like, wow, it's a massive world of payments.
And lastly, Tommy, what's your word?
Musk.
Elaborate, please.
Because Elon Musk would be nowhere without the intersection of fintech and economics.
There we go. That's a new one.
That's the essence. So if you don't know, Elon Musk was one of the founders of PayPal. There was a company called X.com. That's what Elon Musk created. And then Peter Thiel built, I can't remember he had another random name that everybody's forgotten, his company. Those two came together, created PayPal a very long time ago. Or actually, they just celebrated their 20th anniversary. I think that's right. And
that sounds about right. Yeah, because we were sitting at Checkfree going, what are these people doing?
Yeah. So, and then, one reason they were very successful, I would suggest, with that product is they're both obviously, were genius, very, very smart people putting that company together that had, or I think, a really deep understanding, appreciation for economics and what they could influence. And they saw a very kind of new market in e-commerce, particularly eBay ended up being their largest client that really made them work. And they figured out how to begin to make this stuff like cash, value exchange happen in the web world, the e-commerce world, which was, took a lot of deep understanding of economics to achieve that.
Amazing. Love it. Thank you all. So now I will welcome the students to either unmute their mics, or if you would just prefer for us to read your questions, we can go ahead and do that. But I think there's one question I want to address first, pertaining more to the students' perspective. So can you talk about internships for freshmen and sophomores? And then Tommy, I think because you have such a close connection to so many companies, maybe you have a better sense of this.
Yeah, I mean, the simple answer is just go to our website, georgiafintechacademy.org. There's a big button on the very top that says jobs. Click on it, and you're going to have more than you can probably handle in terms of opportunities to look into.
Awesome. And what about you, Fernanda or Jessica? Have you seen anything different or any trends going into opportunities for freshmen and sophomores?
I would say that the experience that I had at NCR is that, yeah, we welcome basically anyone to do internships. And obviously, I think people tend to look more for them when they are a little bit more decided as to like what they might want to do, or even just like have a little bit more experience in their belt with their like major classes as opposed to just like the core classes. But if you want to use it as more of an exploratory way of working, that's also a good idea if, to give you more just like ideas of what's out there. But I would say that, yeah, as a freshman or a sophomore, I was also interning, not quite in what I do now, is more like consulting based. And so I think it's a good way to like get your foot in the door at a company. And especially if you're interested in payments or fintech internship, then yeah, it would be good to start earlier on and then build on that if you really, really like it, and then be able to say like, I interned several times throughout my college career in this industry that I really like.
Let me just throw in another idea that, again, thinking about the two different sides of fintech, I wouldn't rule out looking at a bank as well. Because one of the things that we're thinking about, the companies that are providing the services to the banks need to kind of sort through what they need to provide so they can find those right solutions out there. And I think, again, as you mentioned, project-based stuff, Fernanda, that could be the kind of thing where even if a bank hadn't really thought about it, if you can find somebody that you can kind of capture their imagination, if you can like come up with an idea that there's a 8-month or 8-week project to help them really kind of get their arms around something that they ought to be looking into. I think that's a really good, valuable opportunity for both sides.
And I'll just close out by saying that the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta does have some internship opportunities. For the research department, we are trying to line up internships earlier in students' academic careers. Especially if they want to go into academia and become an academic researcher, because it's important to take certain classes and line up your curriculum in a way that sets you up to successfully compete for grad school. And so I think we've realized that it's too late to try to recruit people once they have that PhD in hand. It's much more important to get to folks at the very beginning of their career and kind of give them opportunities. So the research department at the Atlanta Fed is looking at students and is hiring, providing internship opportunities for students earlier in their careers. The Atlanta Fed also offers a summer internship program. And I think I know that there's opportunities for folks all along, junior, senior. I think it's predominantly for sophomore, juniors, and then for grad students. I think for seniors, they know that those students are kind of going onto the job market. And so I think it's more for sophomore, juniors, seniors. And I would say, Jael, you offered to circulate the contact information, but if you've signed up for the sign-in sheet and I have your email, I'm going to send an email survey out afterwards, just asking for your feedback on this event. And if you guys want to reply to that with your resume, I'd be happy to make sure our HR campus recruiter gets it so that we can get you in the queue for consideration.
Yeah, and lastly, as a current student, I feel like, Jessica, you met me when I was a freshman/sophomore, and Tommy, I feel like you've known me since I was pretty much the same. And what helped me kind of be as engaged into my career was really attending a lot of early career events. So a lot of what the companies are trying to do, because of the hot job market right now and the great need for talent, a lot of them are doing introductory programs specifically for sophomores and even freshmen. So if you're interested in a specific company, you can go into their page and Google if they have any events coming up, and that's a really good way to kind of get familiar with them and see if there are any opportunities.
And I guess also to state maybe the obvious, Jael, just to encourage all of you students, every one of on each of your campuses, there is a handful of people who are dedicated to career placement, and they are phenomenal. I have yet to meet one of those folks on any of our campuses that is just not amazing. And they are there to help you. They want to help you. They are the happiest moments are where they help you get an internship or a job. And so please, if you don't know those people on your campus, please get to know them, because that is probably one of the greatest assets you have at your immediate disposal. And it's those people that I work closely with. It's those people that NCR works closely with, that the Federal Reserve works closely with. I mean, we're all kind of collaborating together, but also really looking to those groups to be a core central place for us to connect with students.
Awesome. Thank you, Tommy. Now we do have one question, so I'll try and get to it. To what extent are digital payment systems which allow direct payment between individuals and business reducing the importance of traditional financial intermediaries such as banks, credit card companies, and others? And then for this, I'll go to Glenn.
You know, I think it's an interesting question. And I think that at the end of the day, the data that we're talking about, unless you're talking about cryptocurrency and then some of the decentralized solutions along those lines, which we could have an entirely separate conversation about, you know, I think it sometimes can be deceptive, like even something like Venmo or PayPal or Square Cash, things like that. You know, the vast majority of those transactions, unless you keep a balance that you're just always working off within Venmo or PayPal, you may not realize it, but you're still running the rails just through all the same traditional systems as you always have. Mm-hmm. It's just a new wrapper that's been put on top of it, which gets back to that same point again that we made, is the plumbing is there. It's just a matter of, you know, what you can put on top of it to be sure that you create the greatest value. And that's definitely something that's been going on quite a bit, is, you know, the non-banks have been the ones that have really captured the imagination. And that's where the banks get very concerned that they're going to be disintermediated. So when it's time to sell additional products, that, you know, the typical consumer will look to somebody else. Rocket Mortgage being a perfect example of somebody like that. That may be the first, you know, stop that they make for a solution. So yes, there is something there, but I don't think it's quite the same level of, you know, making the other piece unimportant, but it does potentially change the power dynamic of who actually gets a chance to, you know, have the deeper relationship. And that's something that banks have been very concerned about, that they don't become kind of the utility behind the scenes as opposed to the trusted advisor they've always been.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Glenn, for closing us out. Thank you, everybody who was in attendance. For those of you who are watching the recording, this was recorded on Valentine's Day of 2022. Thank you all for those who were able to make it. As we said, Jessica sent out a signing sheet. Please go ahead and do that so that we can have you in our system and we can go ahead and follow up with you. Jessica offered to forward resumes, so I would definitely take advantage of that opportunity. And thank you to our wonderful panelists. Your insights were incredibly helpful. I learned a ton, so I hope other students were found it as helpful as I did. That being said, I hope everybody enjoys their Valentine's Day evenings, and yeah, just stay in touch. Yes, of course.
Can I make one final announcement? And that
100%.
The Econ Collaborative of Atlanta Area Institutions will have its second event of the spring 22 semester on February 25th. It's a Friday, and we're doing it at 1 p.m. Oglethorpe University is hosting that, and it'll be a panel conversation with gatekeepers for the job market. So HR recruiters, hiring managers at a couple different firms, just to give perspective on what they're looking for from students. So stay tuned. However you heard about this event, we'll push it out the same way, but we look forward to seeing you guys there. It's gonna be virtual. That way we can make it easily accessible to all the students at all the different universities. So it'll be virtual, not in person. Thanks, Jael.
No, and for those who are interested in internships, that is the event to go. But again, thank you, everybody. And may you all have a wonderful evening. Bye, and thanks for joining.
Thanks, Jael.